I'll be working in the background to get things sorted out online, but I'd like to introduce Amy Ogg in person. She's very kindly agreed to come and be with us on campus today, which is super exciting. I believe we're going to be starting out with an activity, a whiteboarding activity. So I'll let Amy take it away from there. But yes, again, thank you so much. This is being recorded online, but we look forward to your in-person participation. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Meg. Appreciate the warm introduction. Hello, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, do a brief little introduction for those of you who haven't already met me. And then Meg is correct. We're going to do a whiteboarding activity to get started here and then start diving into the nitty-gritty of case studies. So I'll go ahead and share my screen.
We can't see it on here, by the way.
Still not. Let's see. Does this maybe would this be connected to this part?
Yes. Yes.
Haha. Thank you. Perfect. So everyone can see now? All right. So we are UX designers. So of course we are going to UX our case studies like everything else. If we do UX for websites, we do UX for any digital products, no different for our very own case studies. So little intro to me. I'm Amy. If you haven't met me already through some of the previous installments of the series, I'm based here in Seattle. I work as a UX designer. I'm also a team builder and mentor on the side. So I do team building within my own organization. I also volunteer with a nonprofit called Iterate UX. And the purpose of this nonprofit is to bring education about UX design and opportunities for students, and it's global. So we have like UX challenges, mentorship opportunities where you can get a portfolio review, resume review, things like this. I have a creative background. So before UX, I actually was a performing artist and musician and dancer and worked in the coffee industry as a latte artist. So all things creative have always appealed to me deeply, and crafting these like very human experiences. And now I get to do it digitally. My day job, I currently work as a full-time in-house designer in the e-commerce space. Company is called Online Metals. They actually got their start here in Seattle. So they started as like a garage startup, like over 20 years ago. And then because of their growth, they were acquired by a big global tech giant, ThyssenKrupp. It's based in Germany, back in 2007. And what I do here at this company is a lot of end-to-end UX design, as well as I manage the design system. And a lot of information architecture and designs also for the third-party marketplaces beyond like our progressive web app and our responsive website. So for today's agenda, we're going to start off with a whiteboarding activity first, just kind of get our thoughts out there, do a little bit of clustering, and then we're going to dive into different types of case studies that you can feature on your portfolio website. We're going to talk about understanding your users, storytelling, case study structure, and then some tips and tricks for all of you, and then wrap it up with a Q&A session at the end. So heading into the whiteboarding activity, do I just push this slide up or how this works? I'll let the experts deal with this. Yes. But for all of you who are in the room, up here at the front, come on, don't be shy. We're doing this in person. So before COVID and everything, this is how whiteboarding activities were done on glass walls, wood tables, kind of any sort of surface, whiteboards. That's how they got their name, as a whiteboarding activity. So there's a bunch of sticky notes and then pens and papers and stuff up here. And what we're gonna kind of flush out is, your biggest case study related pain points, any struggles, blockers, areas of confusion that you currently have. Do you guys have some, yeah, down here? Yeah.
Be working diligently to pull some apart later. Thank you for
Yeah,
waiting.
feel free to just write on the table, it's easier that way anyway. And you can use as many sticky notes as you want, kind of just get your ideas out there, and then we're gonna put them on the board and start organizing them into groups. Anyone who is attending the session through the Zoom call, you can also type any of your feelings, pain points, struggles into the chat, and we'll write those down for you and put them up on the board too.
I think the screen is automatic when there's a presentation happening. And so not ideal. So should we use kind of the sides, or do you want
Yeah.
to use like we use the wall? Like,
Yeah, I think we could just use like
okay,
the
yes, sorry
side
about that.
here.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, totally.
Excellent.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's no.
Yeah, I think
separate
this side has a
control
little-
for this screen.
I know.
No worries.
Some rooms are ours, yeah.
No worries. We'll just get nice and comfy. A little agile team. And there's no right or wrong answer. There do tend to be some kind of typical things that everybody struggles with, regardless of how experienced or inexperienced you are. Certain things are just hard about putting together a case study. And it's just an idea to kind of maintain how is the barometer and the mood in the room where everyone is at. So whenever you feel like you're kind of wrapped up, we have this, the presentation screen can't be rolled up. So we're going to use this little area right here. You can go ahead and just stick your sticky notes there. And then we can all kind of stay at the front area because we're going to cluster them together. Start finding the patterns where we see similarities between everyone's responses and group them into those similar clusters. So I'll move out of the way here. Let you guys add it.
Very top of mind
Yeah.
Such an essential part of the design process.
It was an information architecture class, so I mean, definitely.
I do it a ton after user testing, all the notes from the customer insights,
Yeah.
then the team will like get together and discuss everything and figure out what our synthesized takeaways are. Are we good? Not missing anybody? Check if we have any from the chat.
I got a couple.
Okay, thank you. I'll start reading some of these off, or actually, if you guys want to read, are people comfortable reading their own? Would you want to read your own off? Yeah, okay, go ahead.
So my first one is I'm just confused on how to make the case studies less wordy and more graphic. So like easier for people to skim through.
That's, yeah, very essential.
One of mine were kind of originality and just thinking of projects that stand out and are also skimmable.
Mhm. Yeah, that is great.
Mine is like communicating results, especially if it's not like real world experience, like it's in a classroom.
Yeah, that one is so hard. Definitely.
I came here not knowing exactly what a case study is, so just how to get started. the
Yeah.
format to include.
Got you covered.
I also came not really knowing what a case study is, so kind of just how to get started and how to showcase more of more of my design process in my portfolio.
Love it.
I think for me is similar of using too many words and not enough images
Mhm.
to show what I did, and also like how exactly I can communicate results when they're not tangible.
Definitely.
I think for me, it's like not using like the cookie cutter process, but actually showing the authentic design process, because it's not like a straight process. Like you kind of go back to like other like stages, kind of like showing the real process.
It's hard to showcase that iterative process, especially in a case study, because they can be so linear. So to like explain how you are fitting in the iterations, yeah, it's definitely a skill.
I got some responses from our folks on mobile that we have to
Awesome.
stick up. So one of the first ones is making info accessible on mobile.
Mhm.
We also had how to structure, so what to include and also what to leave out. And then similarly to that, what details are necessary in a case study.
Love it. Fantastic. Out of the way. Cool. So if everyone wants to belly up to the board, we can go ahead and start grouping some of these. So we do have some shared commonalities. Some might be kind of between. Those ones you can, place in a similar area. And we can, if someone wants to take a sticky note with maybe like a bold marker or some large writing, we can create like a title for each of these different topics and sections.
You can do whiteboard marker too. if you want.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
Our tiny little board.
Our tiny little area, I know.
That's what we do here.
And the whiteboarding is collaborative, so feel free to get in elbow to elbow, bounce ideas off of each other. You don't have much choice here. There's not much room.
Yeah. Here?
Yeah.
Or maybe like here, I'd say.
Yeah.
Here. And also how to get started.
Yeah.
I think the top left can be like the category can be how to like showcasing.
How to showcase them, yeah.
And then what to include. This one.
Oh, what to include is here. These two are definitely,
I think that one. I don't know how to present the case.
that's how to showcase, yeah.
Are those ones?
Having trouble picking what to put in case study,
So,
Bottom left,
that's
yeah.
what to include. This one,
What's the bottom? What question?
this one is kind of like, a lot of these are about types of portfolios, I gather, just, and like how to make certain things stand out.
Or
Yeah, you can take it.
types of portfolio?
Yeah. Wait, then this one might also, cause it's about UI,
Like maybe this one for originality.
yeah. All right.
Yeah, we feeling good? Have a consensus?
Yeah.
Cool. I love it. I love it. So you all have created some 3 major groups here. that all these insights kind of fit into. And this like clustering and whiteboarding activities are really helpful. We use them within our jobs in UX as a way of taking a ton of data that can be from like user interviews, surveys, information architecture, as you mentioned, and synthesizing that down into digestible chunks where we can identify like what are these patterns. So we definitely see the types of portfolios and the whole like visual aspect, tips and tricks, best practices, this sort of topics fitting in here, how to present the case study, how to showcase it. Some of that can even tie into the visual aspects. Like you could argue that the visual presentation is also part of how to showcase. And then what to include, what are those details, what is that actual structure? So congratulations, you're all in the right spot. We can go ahead and grab your seats again at the table, and then we'll dive into the nitty gritty and actually get this stuff solutioned for, which is the next step. So in whiteboarding activity at a company, typically we would have this discussion, trying to figure out, you know, what are these main patterns that we're identifying? And then we would start a little bit of solutioning. What would be like tasks, takeaways, and next steps that we would have from this? So hopefully at the end of this session, you all will have either questions for me if they didn't get answered, or some tasks, takeaways, next steps that either if you have a portfolio, a case study that's in progress to get added to your portfolio, that you'll be able to feel confident about how you're going to approach that. And if you haven't yet started and you're just understanding what even is a case study and how does it fit into all of this, that you'll feel like you have more clarity surrounding this. So go ahead and dive in next. So a little bit of information about case studies. So if you don't know what is a case study yet, it's basically like telling a story about a project that you did and the impact that it had. And as designers, we feature these on our portfolio websites. Sometimes you can also have them existing as like a slide deck or a PDF. Especially if you're interviewing for companies, what you have on your portfolio website, you might have a collection of different case studies. So there are different projects that you've verbally and visually done all the storytelling for, showed like, was my process, this is what I did. You can also have this existing as, you know, your slide deck, whatever, for an interview where you, rather than living online, you would be showcasing this via presentation, something like this. So diving into types of case studies that you can have on your portfolio. I've categorized these into the less impactful and the more impactful, and do realize that that is taken from the perspective of for entry-level designers. All this changes a lot. If you are like senior level, you will find that like some passion projects and stuff like this, senior level designers may have them on their resumes to show off certain things. But as an entry-level designer, the less impactful types of case studies, which are very common, will be like course assignments. This is something that you get either through college, through a boot camp. And the reason that this is not very impactful is that usually there's a provided problem brief. There's a bunch of information that's just kind of spoon-fed to you, but you haven't gone out and done that research yourself. And because there's so many prompts, it doesn't have that real-world feel. There's like so much guidance. It's helpful for learning, but it does not make a very strong case study in terms of hiring managers and recruiters seeing you as a good applicant for a role of like working in the real world. The unsolicited redesign is another popular type of case study that you'll see on entry-level portfolios. That's where you just go, oh, I'm going to redesign the Airbnb landing page, or I'm going to redesign the entire IKEA site, something like this. The problem with this is that these companies already have massive teams dedicated to research. They have reasons why they've done what they've done. Doesn't mean everything's perfect, but redesigning without knowing the internal workings of that company basically shows your lack of understanding that whole research like internal workings in the process. So it might showcase your visual designs well if you're going for like a very visual role, if you're like, depending on what you are showing off, it can be suitable, but they do tend to be less impactful. And then the passion project, which is like something that you are just excited about and you want to design. And so you didn't have anything real world and you just made up project to have on your portfolio. So those are the less impactful ones, but common ones you will see. I will say the disclaimer about the passion project is if it's a passion project that you actually intend to develop, sometimes like you can actually have partnerships. Maybe you have aspirations to start your own startup. You're an entrepreneur. This sort of passion project would be impactful, especially if you're showcasing that you've taken it to working with developers. You're actually going to launch it on the Apple Store. Now it's a real project, right? It's not just a passion idea. The more impactful types of case studies that are on entry-level portfolios tend to be design-a-thon or hackathon projects. It's potential that UW may do design-a-thons or hackathons. Maybe some of you are in groups where you're planning one or you've done one in the past. Even external, there's a lot of different UX organizations where they're open to the public. So anyone can join or any student can join. DevPost and Eventbrite are great places to look those up. And a lot of other universities that will open things to the public. Emily Carr University in Canada was one that they've done a lot of that collaborative, even opened up to US to join for their hackathons. But the more that you network and keep up on LinkedIn with people, you'll be aware of a lot of these opportunities. One that happens on a yearly basis, also based in Canada, is the Proto Jam. So I think they just wrapped up like last week with that one. And then the hackathons can be anywhere from like a 24-hour really quick event to it can be a week, 3 weeks, a month, something like this. The great thing about doing hackathons is that, for one, it shows that under a tight timeline, what can you get built? Can you work under this kind of pressure? Two, if you do well and you win or you place, this can be bragging rights to have on your resume, things to also include as impact on your case study. Three, networking. You're going to be collaborating with teams. So if you've done a lot of solo work, you've worked on projects in your, for course assignments, but you've never worked on like a team of designers and a project manager or worked with developers, this can be a really great opportunity to get that collaborative teamwork and be able to feature that in a case study. Volunteer projects are another really impactful type of case study. And this can be just going out and talking to one of my mentees. She talked to a local martial arts studio and she was like, I want to redesign your website. And they were like, great, yes, please do. No, it's not paid. But if you are desperate for design work and you want something to be real world, you want to practice your real skills and do something that's going to see the light of day out there, it's a great way. Like you don't need to say on your case study, oh, I was unpaid, this was a volunteer thing. The reality is you did fantastic work for a real company that they benefited from. And hopefully that will help to get you a job that you can benefit from. And then the UX internship. So I know many of the students here do have internships already, or maybe you're in a position where you're applying for internships, or next year you'll be applying for internships. And that's a fantastic way for you to be able to, oh, did you have a question?
Yeah, I guess I want you to finish your thought first, but I was wondering, because I have a student job where I do a lot of UX related work. I assume that has the same weight as an internship, or?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, exactly. And internship, I should probably have put like, can also be externship, student job, like anything fitting in that capacity where a lot of times you're actually paid for this work. But they usually are kind of like a contract in a way where an internship or one of these student roles, it might be for 3 months, 6 months, a year. Everything's different, but many times they become a to hire sort of thing. It's a way to get your foot in the door at a company, impress them as an intern where you're learning from them, you're contributing, and then they see you as a viable option to actually be hired. And even if not, even if like some companies practices for interns, they're just using them to get extra work done. But the reality is you still generated extra work, and this work, you know, unless there's like NDAs, things like this, this work you can share on your case study. And that's always something important to consider when you are pursuing internships, externships, things like this. Find out if it's, you know, non-NDA or what that disclosure is, because that can really impact how impactful all your hard work gets to be. You know, do you get to have that live online? Do you get to show that to people? Or is that something that you're just like, oh, I did a ton of work and I can't talk about it or show anyone? So definitely something important to flush out before you accept those. Yeah.
So I know some case studies are like password protected. Does it depend on the company? Because if they, for example, they told me that like I'm not allowed to show some stuff, I can't even make it password protected, right? So I'm just
Yeah, this is like a common practice. I always think it is best policy to check with the company and say like, would you be willing for me to, you know, feature your work on my portfolio? I would, of course, password protect it, so it's not available to the public. It would only be, you know, seen by like hiring managers and like within an interview process. Many times the companies, they're grateful. You've been doing, sometimes these internships are unpaid. You've been doing free work for them. They also want to help you out because they know that like when the internship's over, you might not be working there anymore. They want to help you out in your journey. And it's, you know, best for just clear communication to be on the same page with that. Just, you know, so nothing is getting violated, or to not have unpleasant communication after you've left your role where they find out, oh, we're getting email triggers that people are visiting this and we don't appreciate that at all. So that is best practice. Some people just go ahead and they're like, no one's going to see it. I don't have my portfolio posted publicly. It only goes on job applications. So some people, they just go ahead and add it and password protect it. The reason that companies will have those NDAs, many times like startups or something that's like, you know, a lot of user or data privacy, things like this, that they don't want other people stealing their ideas or knowing about specific research. So like there's good reasons for it. So you want to make sure that you're being ethical while also, you know, not underserving yourself. All right. So while we're UXing the process, like our last event here, we talked about portfolios and setting that up and how you can UX that process. And to me as a UX designer, this is your mindset with everything. You know, what is that design process? We start with that whole research, understanding, empathy. So the first point that we have to ask ourselves is, who are the users? So your users that will be viewing the case study, they're coming into contact with this case study, usually via your portfolio, unless you've sent like a specific case study link, which also can occur. Sometimes on job applications, you can link a very specific case study, or maybe you've applied to a very specific role, and so you've sent a link for this one case study to the hiring manager or something like this. But basically these users who are going to see your case studies are the recruiters, the hiring managers, folks that may be on your interview panel, which might be like a second or third round interview. And if you're doing like freelance work, so if you're starting to do like volunteer stuff or freelancing on the side to get some of this experience, they can be potential clients that are viewing your case studies. So basically anyone viewing your portfolio who has influence in hiring you, that is your user. That is who to understand and research, understand what are their pain points, what is their process with looking at your case studies, what are their goals. They are busy professionals. So fun fact, these are busy people. On average, there have been a lot of studies done recently, and you can find the studies like people will post on LinkedIn. You'll find sometimes different articles being written on Medium about this. But on average, hiring managers and recruiters spend less than 2 minutes reviewing a portfolio and less than a minute per case study, with the average actually being it's like 30 seconds to 55 seconds on a case study. So all your points here about like using visuals, leveraging anything to make it pop, capture their attention. This is essential because they're busy, they don't have a lot of time, and in this market, they have so many options. So you really want to stand out, grab their attention, and hey, it's me, pick me. And maybe not literally jumping up and down, maybe not an animation of yourself. It might make them laugh, but also professional. But making it easy for your users to understand your case study structure, find what are those key points, and understand what you can do. What are your abilities just at a glance? This will be absolutely imperative. And the way that you communicate these different things will be sprinkled throughout your whole portfolio. But once they get to the case study and see your work, they want to understand a lot of things about your process, about your personality, about your visual skills, your prototyping skills, research skills, anything that is related to that job description. So we're going to touch on storytelling. This is going to be, like your tone, your voice, the visual aspects of storytelling, all of this. So this here is the story arc structure. And if you study like writing, even theatrics, so many different disciplines leverage this. And we can leverage this for our case studies. So we have the exposition to the resolution. So the exposition is going to be that start, that beginning. The resolution is the end. And in the middle, we have what is the process. So at the very beginning here at that exposition, we're going to have the backstory and the setup, right? Your users, they need the context of like, what is this project? What is interesting? What is this backstory? What got you into exploring this? Having some conflict and some struggle along the way. This is going to create that level of interest. Nobody likes the boring story that's just the fairy tale. Everything was perfect and they lived happily ever after. They're nice, but they're not realistic. And within this environment, people are looking for you to fit into a very realistic company. These are not fairy tale companies where everything goes as per plan. So they want to know how you handle conflict, how you handle challenges when they come up. Then we have the rising action and the climax. The climax is going to be that high point, and that the high point can be negative or positive, right? All depends on like how you are framing that, how your story works. And then we have the falling action where we are coming down to the resolution, which can be things like how you are measuring the impact, the metrics, the conclusion of the story. How did you wrap up? And we'll get into all those nitty-gritty details here. So we'll dive into verbal storytelling first. So the first point is understanding and leveraging story structure, which we just covered. And I'm happy to share along those slides. I saw people were taking pictures, maybe you're taking like screenshots and stuff, but I'll share the slides so you can have access to that. Then we have tone, voice, and personality. That's all going to be part of the verbal storytelling. Let your personality shine. That's all part of being able to pop out here, like what makes you you versus just another UX designer based in Seattle. What's interesting about you? On my portfolio, I say that I'm bringing light mode, aka sunshine vibes from LA to Seattle because that's where I hail from. I'm from Pasadena. So sometimes you can infuse a little bit of personality. You may also notice I'm wearing a pink blazer. Yes, my portfolio is also pink. You probably noticed this. Pink is my thing. So thinking about like all that branding and stuff that we covered in the last session that we had here, talking about like the visuals, the branding, the color. That will, of course, be part of that. The hierarchy and the accessibility. So in terms of verbal storytelling, what that hierarchy will be like, say, text size, your titles, your body, how you are aligning your text. Fun fact, this is something I see a lot on when I'm reviewing student portfolios, is centered text that is very, 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 very long. And it's wonderful that people have so much that they want to say and share about this project and they're passionate about it, but it's hard to read. And when you go back to who are your users, who are busy people, they need to see something at a glance. So adding some hierarchy, bolding something, underlining something, making something larger to pop out. You can really leverage a lot of that. That kind of, it's verbal, but it also is visual with using some of those weights and sizes to do some of this storytelling. The accessibility is really important. Don't just assume that all hiring managers and recruiters are not colorblind or don't have poor vision or many of these things. The more you can make your portfolio showcase that you understand accessibility, especially if you're applying for an accessibility role, or I mean, all UX designs should have accessibility to some degree. You want to make sure that you're not having like images with text on top that's impossible to read and people are somehow supposed to understand what the story is about and they can't, or very low contrast, teeny tiny text. If I have to loom in and squint into my screen, like, no, I'm not going to spend this kind of energy when I have 500 applicants to choose from. I'm going to choose the ones that make it easy for me. Using white space, the absence of visuals is going to allow that space to mentally process what is happening. And you can use, like with the verbal storytelling, things like quotes. This can be something that maybe a teammate said about you or the client said about the project. You can insert those using the white space and the text to really help with that storytelling process. The text alignment, we touched briefly already on this, centered versus left aligned. Avoid too much text. People skim rather than read, and there's no perfect like, oh, stick to 150 word count or anything like this. Sure, people have tried to do some studies, but the reality is if people are intrigued and you make it easy for them and you leave the breadcrumbs of the story along, they're going to want to join you on the journey. So even if it's longer, have you ever found yourself reading an article where it's so interesting that you realize, wow, I just kept scrolling and scrolling and reading? So this can happen if you're creating enough of that visual interest, enough of that content interest. But in general, part of best practices is, balancing the text and the visuals, because, people are reading left to right, they're going to skim. Allow those gold nuggets that you want to communicate up out. And then we have the visual storytelling. So use visuals to help. This can be illustrations. Maybe they're ones that you have made and you can kind of call out how you have illustration or graphic design skills. Duolingo does that really well. You see the cute little Duolingo bird there. They do a ton of animation as well, and bring that like motion. And that can be a great way to capture attention on your case study. When we see something moving, we notice it right away. So if you have a well done animation, you have some interactive prototype that you have going on, this can be a great way to bring that all to life. You can also have photographs. So here we have a photograph of a little whiteboarding activity. It's a great way that you can showcase, tell what you did without having to spell out what you did. And then videos. A couple methods I wanted to discuss were the STAR method and then the cardio method. So STAR method, I'm sure you've all heard of. Everybody loves the STAR method. We have our situation, task, action, and result. It makes things easy. It's easy to remember. And kind of everything can easily fit into it, but it's a little open to interpretation, right? The cardio method I really love because it provides a little bit more guidance. And so this is context, assumptions, research, discoveries, iterations, and outcome. And you might notice that the cardio method aligns really closely to the design process itself. You might already be starting to notice like, oh, research, discovery, iterate, outcome, like measure, metrics. What I like about the cardio method for case studies is it's a very loose sort of structure for you to start with that storytelling structure. You can use either. The STAR method, for sure, people will say use the STAR method for interviews and stuff, so you can't go wrong. But just wanted to throw out another less known method for you all to explore here. And then the promised case study structure. So I've created a little bit of information architecture here, which I'll have another slide where we can zoom in more into that. Basically, up at the top, we have the context. So going back there to the cardio method, context is that first step. So on a case study, you want to establish that context. Remember our whole storytelling structure arc? We need to establish what is the background on the story? What is the background on my project? Next is going to be your design process. And so that can be any kind of design process that you're following, your own or an established one. The assumptions behind your first iteration, the research done to test those assumptions, then discoveries that came from the research that you conducted, ideation and design, then the user testing, usability testing, and then again, iterations produced as a result of that user testing. Outcome of the changes, that's where you're going to start fitting in those like metrics and things like this. And then your takeaways, reflections, and next steps. So here's a little bit closer view of how this whole tree fits in. So within the context, we have, the company, the role, the team, the time frame, tasks, constraints, project type. And I notice in a lot of student portfolios that many times this is just missing. They dive into the case study project, and I'm going, okay, what is this? Like, who's the company? How long did this take you? Were you working alone? Were you working on a team? What tools were you using? I want to like understand that background and have that introduction before I'm just suddenly plunged into designs. Establishing your design process early on really helps to pitch you as a professional. You don't have to be super like, and here's my design process and have a screenshot of it. You can totally do that, or you can just kind of fit it into your storytelling as headlines of, if you're using design thinking, if you're using double diamond, like where you're starting with each of those, and just have it worked into your storytelling. So getting into context, what to include, the company or the product that you're working on, always helpful for that context. Your role, what were you called? Like, how did you function? The team, was the hiring managers are going to want to know, was this a solo project? Was this collaborative? And they'll have reasons for liking both. So they want to know that you can operate on your own, that you can work by yourself and you don't need like a ton of supervision. You're motivated and a self-starter, especially for like startups and agencies. They'll very much prize that. But also they want to know that you can collaborate on a team, that you've worked with engineers, that you understand how to work with marketing, when to involve different team members. The project timeframe and scope, that will let them know how quickly you work and the quality of work that you put out in that time. And also, sometimes they're going to want to know, did you work on long-term projects beyond just tiny little features that were released in a month? So it's nice to have a combination of like those quick turnaround projects and then very like long-term end-to-end projects. Then the tasks and deliverables that you had, that's something that you can either work into the storytelling along the way, or you can just outright mention them. your constraints, the challenges. If you had a brief, sometimes if you're working with a client, they'll actually have a goal and a whole brief that they want for you to be following. And then include the project type. Just let people know right away, was this a redesign? Was this for a hackathon? You don't necessarily have to say if it's volunteer work, but if it was like for a, maybe it's a, Habitat for Humanity or some sort of like nonprofit social good, something like this, letting them know what is that project type. Then you have your design process, which again, we already mentioned, it can be worked in throughout the storytelling, or you can just outright show a picture, let them know, hey, I understand what a design process is and here's how I use it. Design thinking and double diamond are two of the most popular. What you see here is the design thinking with the empathize, define, ideate, prototype, test, and then the less known sixth portion, which is implement. There's double diamond, human-centered design. You can also have your own process. You can make up your own thing. Is it, think, build, strategize, whatever, how you want to think about it. You can make this fun, you can personalize it. And that can also showcase how you think about the process and how you use it. Then we have our assumptions and hypotheses to start setting the stage of this project. So these can be, as we're diving in and starting to tell the story within the case study, what our underlying assumptions are. This can be like a problem statement. I'm sure you may have already been exposed to like what are problem statements, or how might we do this so that a user may blah, blah, blah. Your hypothesis or hypotheses, you may have several. If you're working on something for a company, the business, they have some hypotheses that they want for you to be testing. And all of this is nice to kind of establish there at the beginning. And then, you're going to either validate or challenge this. And then research methodologies and insights. So for the research part, there's so many different ways that you can approach the research. Mixed methodologies. You don't have to have all of these. These are just some ideas of what the research may include. So that can be, anything from like information architecture would be tree tests, card sorts, things like that. User or stakeholder interviews, especially if this is a project where you are needing to like understand from the very beginning, if it's a new app concept or something like this. Secondary research, what you've gone out and studied in the world, market research, things like this. Competitor benchmarking, competitive analysis, the SWOT, strength, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. That's something you can show. Surveys, A/B testing, preference testing, heat maps, empathy maps, user or customer journey maps. And then on the synthesizing and analyzing part of it will be the insights that you gained from this research. What were your key findings, like your analysis, the data synthesis, and then similar to kind of like what we did here, the affinity mapping and clustering. Then after the research, we have our discoveries, which is going to be, well, what did you learn? What did you find? What popped out? Were your initial assumptions challenged or validated? And ultimately, how did this help you to define the problem that you're going to focus on, and then start to identify potential solutions to pursue? And that's the meat, that's the gold. Maybe not meat for everyone if you're a vegetarian or vegan, but gold, we all like gold. Then we have ideation and design. So now time to get visual. So think back to that visual storytelling, images, videos, interactions. Like this is a way to showcase that you know how to prototype, that you know motion design, that you understand how to wireframe without saying, I know how to wireframe, in a visual way to show this. So this can be things like information architecture, which you had mentioned. That will be things like user flows, site maps. You saw the little information architecture tree that I did of the case study structure. That is information architecture. design ideation. This can be any combination, like depending on the project, low, mid, high fidelity concepts and variations. Another big thing I see in student case studies is many times they just hop to high fidelity and they want to show their pretty designs, and they feel embarrassed of like the ugly designs that didn't work and they already know they failed. Well, guess what? The hiring managers and the recruiters, they want to know that you like understand that you explored that. That's all part of the normal process. Like, no idea is like bad. We sketch it out, we try, we do crazy 8 exercises, throw it all out there, and then figure out what do our users want. And then our iterations on those initial designs. And that's another thing. Many times in student case studies, I will see that they want to show that ideal fairy tale story of like, here's my perfect designs and the outcome. The reality is it's a messy process. You want to see those like iterations. Even when you came up with those initial variations and concepts, did you then review with your team? Did you discuss with your peers? How did you narrow that down for user testing before you even got user testing feedback? Wireframes and prototypes, this can be screenshots, this can be videos, it can be links to it. And then we have testing. And this is where you can really let your strategy shine. So ask yourself, like, what were your testing plans and goals? The tasks that you wanted to have your users go through. Did you put together a script or a testing plan beyond outlining what these goals were? You know, if you have this documentation, what was your strategy? How did you approach this? What did you want to get from your users? What did you want to learn? This can be like usability testing. This can be moderated or unmoderated. There's prototype testing you can conduct through like Maze or Sprig. You can do in-person user testing. You can also do remote where you're just on video calls and screen sharing. And so what did you learn through those different methods? What were those methods? What did you learn? Was anything a surprise? Sometimes you feel like you get validation that you're on the right track, and then other times those gold nuggets come through where you're like, oh, I wasn't expecting this. Where did this come from? And hiring managers and recruiters love to see those like surprises highlighted. Were those assumptions challenged or validated? That's all about bringing the assumptions into the testing and the moment of truth. What is this outcome going to be? Then we have iterations again. So you have the iterations which are internal, where you have all that concepting and design and figuring out with your team, what do we like? Why should we show this to the customers? How should we refine it? Now that you've put something in front of the customers, now from that user-facing perspective, what do they want you to change? What didn't work for them? What was confusing? Why? How did you decide to solution for that? So always based on those research insights from your user testing, show what you changed and show why. People are not going to want to just see that, and we iterated and we changed things. Okay, I want to know how you think critically. That will tell me how valuable of an asset you will be to the team. And then showcasing your designs before and after, because like we are intimately familiar with our own projects and we remember what they look like to the tiniest pixel perfect detail. But whoever this recruiter or hiring manager is, remember, they just skimmed through things and it's been 30 seconds and they don't remember what your designs looked like. Don't be hurt by that. It's helpful to see a before and after so they can see like what changed. Sometimes having arrows pointing or a little note to showcase like we changed this because of what users said. Highlight something with a red box, any way that you can call it out and make that really user friendly. Showcasing the mock-ups of those iterations and then your final design and prototype. And again, you don't always have to include your prototype link. You can do a video walkthrough. You can have, turn on prototype mode where it's showing all your noodles, take a screenshot and show how fancy you are. Just get the point across that you know how to do the thing. And then we have the outcome, which you had asked about, metrics. ultimately, nobody wants to see a case study that is not impactful. Great, you're a fantastic designer that designs things that nobody cares about or that aren't helpful. We want to know, like, what is the impact? What was the outcome? What are those metrics? And sometimes when I'm starting a project, I think about what those metrics will be. How will I measure this from the beginning? Rather than at the end, because sometimes at the end you're like, oh, how will I measure this? And it can be nice to have that time to let it simmer throughout, and you're cross comparing with the user feedback, with talking with your team, letting that really simmer over time. Sometimes you'll have your initial ideas, and then you'll get additional metrics that you might think of, or ways that you might obtain those metrics along the way. So this is going to be, for this outcome, what was the result of the changes? What was the outcome of this initiative? Now, it doesn't have to be just positive either. It can be negative. Like a good story, we love the climax, we love the conflict. Sometimes it means that, like, this was a really cool thing, and then you hit into this roadblock that was just unimagined. You couldn't know. We thought this would be how it goes, and then the business pivoted. It's out of your control. You still showcase that you understand, like, well, how did you handle that? When the business deprioritized something, how are you going to cope with that? How do you pivot quickly? What's your attitude like? Or even like, if something is not an ideal solution, that something technical comes up later, how do you quickly present what can be the solution in the meantime, even though you can't have that ideal, what you wanted? What impact did it have? How did this impact the community, the company, the organization, whatever this was that you were designing for? And those metrics, how did you measure or plan to measure the outcome and success? Metrics are a really difficult one because it's going to depend what industry you're designing for. Like if you're in e-commerce like I am, everyone talks about, ROI and EBIT and conversion rates, abandoned carts. Like you'll find that, like, a lot of those metrics are what's going to matter. The monthly users, site traffic, things like this. That's not going to be the case for every project or for every company. So sometimes the metrics are going to be like, a lot of the work I do, for example, design systems. How do you measure something that's so internal, right? Your metrics are conducting surveys, collaborating with engineers and with these different teams to determine where things were, how they've come, and how does that meet what were your team's or the company's goals? How and what ways is, like, the design system working harder for the company? Maybe this is that this percentage of people are using it more. There's this much percentage increased adoption. So sometimes you have to get really creative about, like, how will we measure success for this? And if you don't know, and this is a personal project and you don't have someone you can just talk to at school, totally recommend get on ADP list, get on the mentoring club, get on someplace, talk to a mentor and ask them, like, how would I measure this? Talk to a professional, and especially if they are working in that field that you are designing for. Also, Google is our friend. Conduct a Google search. You would be amazed at, like, what you can come up with. And ChatGPT. I know a lot of people are, like, iffy about AI, but depending on what the question is and what you want to ask, it can really generate some fantastic results for you. You can just give it the prompts. What are types of metrics that I could measure for a project within this space that contains blah, blah, blah? Like, feed it the information that you want it to know. Now, of course, if this project is under NDA, maybe don't tell them the name of the company. Like, you need to be smart about it. But yeah, the metrics, absolutely. Coming to the end of the case study, this is where people want to see what was that impact. And it doesn't always even just have to be at the end. On my case studies, I even have it as part of my tile. So when my case study tile is viewable, there's an image of my product that I designed. And then I talk about the impact right there, lure them into like, why should they read this case study? Oh, well, because this, led to 300% increased business and revenue for the company. Okay, maybe she knows what she's doing. So the way that you can like call out and yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you. We will wrap up here very quickly. So takeaways, this echoes the sprint retrospective, which is part of the Agile framework, where you will reflect on, what were your key learnings, those takeaways, particular challenges and constraints that you face. That could be, it's a hackathon, it's a design-a-thon. We only had 24 hours, so how can we do deep research? What are your next steps? And what would you do differently? This shows how you can reflect and how you learn and how you grow as a designer. A couple pro tips here at the very end to UX your own process. Always, we start with research. Study other designers' case studies to get the visual inspiration. You'll see how they're handling text, imagery, motion, all of this. That will really help you get ideas on like, well, what do I like? Because nobody wants to waste a ton of time playing around with something when they don't even know if they're going to like it. But when you see something, you recognize that's it. That's what I want. Now, how can I go about doing that? Understanding your users' pain points and so that you can actually solve for them. Network with recruiters, network with hiring managers, see what they're posting on LinkedIn. They talk about what they see and what they want. And then be strategic. Before jumping into design, write out your case study in notes or Google Docs. That will allow you to focus on that content so that things that are really important don't get forgotten and that your message can be super clear. And then I know we are over time here, so I will open up if people need to split or any Q&A if you guys have additional questions along the way. Yeah. And if you prefer to just connect with me on LinkedIn, you can scan the QR code or type in the link if you're old school. I'm friendly and I don't bite, so. Thank you. Yeah. That's a great question. I would say tread carefully. If you're, say, actively applying to roles, I would always check and make sure that like those changes are in tandem and reflective of like the work that you did, because some changes they will make after that will continue to be improvements. Other times you might not want that being something that you're responsible for. So you can you can link it to your case studies. You can link it to your resume even in your projects. And it can be a really impactful and user-friendly way for people to just go straight there and see like, oh yeah, oh, you designed this, awesome. But yeah, do frequently check and make sure everything's not broken. And I've done that. I've done both, so that I've had like my work preserved, because essentially the website is a living document. It will change. And I do want to highlight like what I was responsible for. So I take like the screenshots. There's some plugins you can use, like the awesome screenshot recorder. It's really great for grabbing like a full web page. It's a browser extension. You can use stuff like that. And then of course, linking to the site. You can also video record yourself walking through, which I've done. Loom is great because you can have a nice little bubble of your face down in the corner. And then you can walk yourself through the mobile or desktop experience and even talk through it as you scroll, like, but this is what I designed, blah, blah, blah. And then you have that saved for all eternity. Yeah.
Project last quarter, and it was really.
Loom is awesome. I'm trying to convince my company to get me like the full fancy account instead of the free one. Any other questions? Any specific metric stuff that didn't get covered? Yeah, you can track adoption, especially like if this didn't exist before, basically it goes from 0 to this and in this amount of time. So I would track on what was the amount of time. You could track it like sometimes I'll look at like what's the 1 week mark, what's the 1 month, 3 month, 6 month, and consistently measure. And then I'll update my portfolio over time as like eventually maybe you get to the 1 year mark and you can see how that has changed. Also, if you've done any sort of like a baseline survey ahead of time, that can help with being able to showcase adoption of like what was the need for that, and like just because this didn't exist before, what were they using before and how much was that used, and could you compare those metrics to the new metrics of like what was the adoption of that previous platform or tool compared to what you're using now, and even the user experience, how did they feel about the new experience compared to what was in place before. Yeah. Yeah, so for the presentation process, I make it a little bit different. So I do something similar to this where I'll give a little intro about me, because depending on who will be on the interview panel, like will they know you, will they have been filled in? So sometimes it's nice to give a little hello, here's me, here's what I'm about. I also it's in slide form rather than built within the website. So a lot of times the text I just put in my notes. I love using Canva for presentations because you can be in presenter mode. You can have your notes hidden where they don't see what your notes are, but you can just read off of them. It makes your life so easy, unless you make a big blunder in your screen sharing your notes, then that's hilarious. But that's a really great way to do that. And then just sometimes those presentations will be more like showcasing your images or showcasing concepts or a quote or something. So they're kind of a pared down version because you're talking through it in a more like live way, or maybe even demoing. Like you might even, there's times where I've offered, would you like to see me demo this? And just talk them through that. There was one job actually that it was like a surprise for me, and they said there would not be a portfolio demo, and then they asked for it. So I didn't have a slide deck ready. Pro note, have a slide deck ready, even if they say there is not going to be a demo, because it could happen. So I ended up having to share straight from my website, scrolling. So that's also kind of a nice thing to have in your back pocket. It might not be the best way to present, like a slide deck shows that you know how to present in a professional setting, but also being able to pivot in a non-ideal situation. I ended up getting the job. So you can spin it like in a way that works for you. Acknowledge that like, I wasn't aware we would do the portfolio demo. Great, let me pull up my website. And that shows that you are flexible. You can insert that you have a sense of humor. But in general, always come prepared for every scenario so you are ready to put your best foot forward, whatever they choose to do. Any other questions? These are good questions. Yes, and I would recommend to approach them like when you're studying what that portfolio would look like. Type in UX researcher portfolio. Sometimes you will find designers are also researchers, and they will have like a separate section for like their UX research case studies, which many times will be showcasing repositories and strategy, and oftentimes not have as much of the like visual element in some ways, although there are many researchers that will still incorporate that visual element by sharing screenshots of like what they can. Now, some of that research is very private for the companies, so it can be hard to like share. I've seen even some UX researchers record a video walkthrough of like what they could share, and then just talking through their process, how they were strategic, what sort of methodologies they pursued, what those outcomes were, and then the collaboration. Like that is really key of like, as a researcher, where did this research go? Were you sharing this with marketing team, with the designers? How was this being used, and how did you work hand in hand to ensure that what was being designed was matching up with, you know, what those user insights were, or what those, you know, if they're even not a UX researcher, sometimes you'll be doing like market research or even those business insights that will need to be compared. But I really recommend looking at like those specific portfolios, and I'll be sending along some resource lists of you know, some case studies of like why they work. Some, you know, here's like some ideal case studies to look at. Here's some student case studies that you can look at and see what, like, well, amongst your peers, because sometimes it's daunting when you look at like the most amazing portfolios and you're like, oh, how would I ever put together a case study like this to get started? I need to like start. So it's nice to see like at the student level what's expected, what's normal, and what would I be like up against. And network with people on LinkedIn. A lot of times you'll see that they are posting their portfolios. They will share it as a post. They'll have it as a button or a link somewhere on their profile. And you can check out and see what they're posting. If you follow, like I'm active in the women in product and women in UX Facebook groups, people are constantly putting up their portfolios and asking for like, hey, I just redesigned this. What do you guys think? Or can you give me feedback? And it's really cool to see like what's out there and how people are handling things. Like, what is your style? What resonates with you, and how do you want to pitch yourself to these companies? Yeah. Yeah. I try to strike both. And the way I handle it is with hierarchy. So I left align my text. I make sure things are legible, accessible, and not too lengthy. They're not it's not a Medium article. It can be easy for that to happen. So I try to keep it brief enough, and then I will bold those sections that I'm like, if what they need to take from this is this statement, like even if I just want them to look at a glance and understand that this is what I'm talking about, that at least that can be retained even while they're scrolling at a glance. So that's how I handle. I think something important to consider is like you bring up a good point. These people have good jobs, like they've done the thing, but you don't know what was their pathway to do the thing. Was this because they had someone on their side who already worked there? Unfortunately, right now, a lot of times it's like who you know. It's so competitive that many times, you know, to get an in with a company, it's because you got a referral. And that's why you got noticed in this. It wasn't before. You weren't bad before. Maybe you were just as good as everyone else, but there's so many to wade through, like how they pick, and it will become subjective. Like what are they looking for? Really comparing with the job description. And this helps if you're not going for super generalist roles. That makes it hard to like design a solution for everyone, right? But if you're targeting, say, I want to work as a UX researcher in healthcare, you've targeted it very specifically now, which allows you to then really craft for that specific space. And then you don't have to worry about hitting the mark for all these other people. You'll start seeing those common patterns of like, what do they want to see? What should you have here? And can you keep it short enough? In general, they just want to see like, can you do what's required on the job description? Does your case study and portfolio align with what's on that job description? Because all those details, that's what they want to know in the interview.
I really appreciate the answer to that because I am one of those super specific people. We always do expect design. And I guess my problem there is like, how can I make sure that I can tailor my portfolio to all of the different job postings I'm applying to, because they all seem to require a lot of different skills. Like some are very UX focused, others are more in video training or like web interactions as well. But how can I tailor my portfolio to the student?
Yeah, it's difficult. I would say like I always start with research. So I would start with the job description of like, what are they saying? What do they want? What are those keywords? What are those skills and tools